So it is official. Max Verstappen is the 2023 Formula One World Champion, clinching his third straight World Championship. Not that it has been in any doubt since the first race in Bahrain. It has got to go down as one of the most impressive, dominant seasons by any driver in the history of Formula One. Max has been in a league of his own. He's been a cut above the rest. He has well and truly earned this World Championship. He more than deserves it. Although he's had the best car, he's extracted the most out of it, got everything out of the package, got everything out of himself, made barely any mistakes. He is a worthy world champion without a doubt this year. Max managed to clinch the World Championship during the sprint race on the Saturday in Qatar, after his teammate Sergio Perez, who was the only driver left that could beat him in the World Championship, was involved in the collision and retired from that race. That ultimately confirmed Max as the world champion even before that sprint had even been completed. But in the end he managed to finish second in that sprint behind McLaren's Oscar Piastri, and there and then was able to celebrate his third straight world championship. But like I said, we've known this has been coming all year long, really, since the first race of the season back in March. Max has completely outclassed the opposition in dominant fashion, breaking records all year long. He's won 14 races out of the 17 so far completed. He's been on pole position 10 times, which matches his equal best from 2021 when he won his first World Championship. And the scary thing is we've still got 5 races to go, so the numbers are only likely to get bigger. And by winning his third World Championship, Max has joined an exclusive club of drivers. He became just the 11th driver in Formula One history to win 3 or more World Championships, joining Juan Manuel Fangio, Jack Brabham, Sir Jackie Stewart, Niki Lauda, Alain Prost, Nelson Piquet, Ayrton Senna, Michael Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel and Lewis Hamilton. He also became only the 5th driver to win 3 consecutive world titles, joining Fangio, Schumacher, Vettel and Hamilton. With the way that he's performed this year, Max has more than earned his place in these pantheon of greats. And what's more impressive is that he's still only 26 years old, so he's still got plenty of time to keep on developing and evolving into a more rounded driver. I mean, right now you'd have to say he is quite a complete driver as it is. Maybe there are still these little areas here and there that he could still improve on and get better, which just goes to show just how impressive a driver he has become. He is driving better than ever he has done in his career, and he's only getting better. That's the most impressive thing. He has got still loads of room to improve and go to an even higher level than he's performing at this moment in time. I think the key to any great world champion is performing on a consistent basis, and that is exactly what Max has done this year. He has been ultra consistent at every single race that we've been to. The only exception really being Singapore, when he finished in 5th place. That's the only time he's been off the podium. Other than that, he's finished 1st or 2nd at every other Grand Prix. And another great trait of Max this year has been the fact that he's made very little mistakes. In fact, I can't really recall very many. And he's very rarely had an off day. More than often than not, he is getting the maximum out of the car. He's consistently putting the car on pole position, or at the very least at the front of the grid. He's consistently outperforming his teammate. I mean, the numbers compared to Sergio Perez are pretty alarming. It's probably one of the most dominant displays against a teammate in a dominant championship winning car. I mean, Perez is now more than 200 points behind Max in the World Championship. Given that Max has a contract with Red Bull until the end of 2028, you have to assume or expect that he will go on to win more World Championships in the coming years. You'd also have to say that he and Red Bull will firmly be the favourites for next year and in 2025 because the regulations are stabilised. The only uncertainty around his and Red Bull's dominance being broken is 2026 when the new power unit regulations come in. I think although the regulations are unchanged for the next 2 seasons, it's not going to be necessarily easy for the likes of Mercedes, McLaren or Ferrari to close the gap to Red Bull and push them harder for the World Championship, because Red Bull and Max are performing at such a high level that their consistency is just incredible and they very rarely put a foot wrong. So that only puts more pressure on these teams to be as perfect as they can over a entire season, and that is extremely difficult to do. That's not to say that it's impossible, because no team is unbeatable in Formula One, and there has been the odd occasion this year that Red Bull has looked vulnerable when put under pressure. But going back to talking about Max, I think that now that he's won his 3rd World Championship, I think when a driver wins a 3rd world title or more, that assures them as one of the all-time greats in the sport. Not to say that other drivers who have won less than 3 championships cannot be considered as one of the all-time greats. For example, the likes of Fernando Alonso and Jim Clark only won 2 world championships, but there are many people that consider them to be one of the greatest drivers to have ever driven in F1. It's also likely that these drivers would have won more championships. It's just that certain things played out in their career that prevented them from winning more titles. So now that Max has that 3rd world championship under his belt, where does that leave him in the discussion of the all-time greatest drivers? Would you put him in the top 10? Would you still leave him outside the top 10? Would you place him in the top 5 or even in the top 3, maybe even the best ever? It is one of the most difficult debates where you would rank a certain driver compared to others in the all-time list. It's really only a personal preference. You can't really base it on facts because drivers from one era cannot really be compared to another driver from another era, such as the difference in rules and regulations. So I'm going to give my opinion as to where I would rank Max among the all-time greatest drivers in Formula 1, simply based off his career so far. So I'm not going to go through my list in its entirety. I'm just going to explain where I would place Max on my personal list of greatest drivers. Based on his career trajectory and how he's performed over the last 3 years when he's won his 3 world championships, I would now place Max at the back end of the top 10. I think before this year I would have placed him just outside, but I think given how he's performed this year, just how dominant he's been, you have to say that he's now a top 10 greatest ever driver. I think that he's still got a bit of a way to go to be classed as a top 5 greatest ever driver, but if he keeps performing the way that he is at the moment, then he will certainly be in the topic of conversation. But on my personal list, I'm going to name names, but I won't put them in a particular order. My top 6 I class as the big 6 of Schumacher, Senna, Fangio, Hamilton, Prost and Jim Clark. I don't think that Max is ready to be compared to these particular drivers because these 6 for me stand out among all the rest because of how their careers panned out and how they performed on track. So given that I wouldn't put them in the same bracket as those top 6 who for me are the best of the best and are in a league of their own, I would probably place him in the next crop of drivers who are just underneath, with the likes of Fernando Alonso, Sebastian Vettel and Sir Jackie Stewart. But out of those drivers I've just mentioned, I think I'd only place him ahead of Stewart. I think he's still not quite as good as Sebastian Vettel or Fernando Alonso, even though you'd have to say, looking at the numbers, he's got more championships than Alonso, and if he wins the next 5 races, he would actually surpass Sebastian Vettel's career total for number of wins. But I think that people forget just how good Sebastian Vettel was, particularly during his Red Bull days when he was winning his 4 straight World Championships. Even though in 2 of those World Championship seasons, in 2011 and 2013, he was completely dominant and wasn't really challenged. In 2010 and 2012, Red Bull were pushed all the way by Ferrari and McLaren in each of those 2 years, and arguably didn't actually have the strongest package in each of those 2 seasons. It was just simply down to the fact that Vettel and Red Bull worked their magic and got a bit of luck, but they got over the line because of how good they were as a combination. As for Alonso, I think while there is maybe that argument that he's under-delivered in his career based off his numbers, for the fact that he's only got the 2 World Championships to his name, he hasn't won a race for a decade, he's stuck on 32 career wins. The fact that he has been a consistent driver across his whole career has never really faded, despite the fact that he's now 42 years old. He's still got amazing racecraft, he's still got that tenacity, that aggressiveness, that relentless push to improve himself. He's got that amazing capacity to know what is going on in the race, know how the strategy is going to play out, know when other drivers are going to pit. All these factors he is able to compute while he's driving. When you put all of that together, you have a very special driver. I think even though Fernando maybe isn't the best qualifier, maybe isn't even the best racer, as he put it a few years ago, he is a 9 out of 10 in all of the areas, which for me anyway puts him firmly among the greatest drivers of his generation and for me in the top 10 greatest drivers of all time. I think also longevity comes into it because Fernando has been racing for more than 20 years in Formula 1, although he did obviously have those couple of years off in 2019 and 2020 to race in other series. Same with Seb, he raced in Formula 1 for 15 and a half seasons. So that I think is also a factor in why I would put them ahead of Max at this moment in time. Max has been racing in Formula 1 for nearly a decade now. In fact, it'll be a decade in 2025 because of course he started in 2015 when he was just 17 years old, and with his contract going until 2028 he'll be 31, so that will have given him a good 14 years of racing at the pinnacle of motorsport. But it was to say that if he continues this run of success, Verstappen won't go on to surpass the likes of Alonso, Vettel, and maybe even other drivers such as Prost or Senna in the discussion of the greatest drivers of all time. Because if he sees out his current Red Bull contract until the end of 2028, that gives him another 5 seasons in F1, so that's plenty more opportunities to win more world championships and win plenty of more races. And with the way that things are going, who's to say that Max won't go on to become F1's greatest ever driver, because I think he is extremely happy with how things are going at Red Bull and he loves being inside the team. The fact that he can rely on them to build him a competitive car that is capable of performing week in, week out, winning races, winning championships, is something that he clearly enjoys and is relishing. And it's the same for Red Bull, because they love the fact that they can rely on Max to get the most out of the car, no matter the circumstances, no matter the conditions, no matter the circuit that they are racing on. But there is potentially one more thing standing in his way from becoming the greatest driver of all time, and that is his future, because Max has continuously hinted that he may stop racing in Formula 1 at the end of 2028 when his contract at Red Bull expires. There's been several times this year that he's mentioned about how he is becoming a bit disillusioned with the amount of races that Formula 1 has at the moment on the calendar. We are currently racing 22 times a year, and that is going to increase to 24 next year and could possibly grow even more in the future. So I think all the signs are pointing towards Max stopping at the end of 2028. But regardless of whether he decides to hang up his helmet at the end of 2028, I think even if the unlikelihood that he doesn't go on to win another championship, I think he's already done enough to put himself among that discussion of the best drivers that have ever raced in Formula 1. Well, there you have it. That's my take on where I would put Max Verstappen among the all-time greatest drivers. But now I want to hear what your opinion is. Where would you put him on your personal list? Be sure to let me know in the comments section. But also, don't forget to leave a like on the video and to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.